All right, well, we're so lucky to have with us today the president and director of GreenPower Motors, Brendan Riley. Thank you so much for being with us today. So I got lots of questions about buses because we did an episode about buses. Remember that one, Jess?
We called it The Magic School Bus, which is my favorite show growing up. School buses are this weird topic where we send our children to school every day of the school year, and then they show up at school, but we don't talk about much what happens when they're on an actual diesel-powered school bus. I'd love to get your thoughts on that. Obviously, we kind of know what happens on the bus, but...
Interestingly enough, school buses are the safest form of transportation in the world. It's safer than you two going out, walking to your mailbox and getting your mail and walking back to your home. School bus statistically are even safer. As soon as the kid's on board, it's as safe as it gets. So it's a very safe form of transportation. Most school buses are diesel, and they're older. The average life of a school bus here in the U.S. is 15 years. So they're older style diesels. They do pollute a lot. They call them criteria pollutants, particulate matter, all kinds of stuff that comes out of the exhaust of the diesel and actually gets right into the bus itself. The school buses definitely are not only a source of pollution for the environment, but also they pollute the cabin more so than if the vehicle wasn't diesel. So that is the story with diesel school buses, and that's why GreenPower and I guess the current administration are very excited about electrifying, making them zero emission.
Now, what's your experience been with parents and bus drivers and school districts when you talk to them about electric buses? Have you felt like there's been like a tipping point in the past few years, or are you still like trying to, get through to them?
No, they're very excited. This is it's one place where, in transit, the riders don't necessarily have the push that they do in the school bus market. So in the school bus space, the parents, administrators, drivers have been very supportive about electrifying or making the fleet zero emission.
But now let's go to the transit side, to the city buses and so forth, where the average rider, I guess you bring up a good point here, where there's like not a school committee meeting where you can get up and say, my kids are in a stinky school bus. People don't seem to care as much. Are cities going to electric buses in the way that you thought they would?
Yeah, I think the path has been what I expected it to be. I got into this space in 2011 and doing originally just transit buses. I expected it to be a long path. My bosses always said, no, it's going to happen sooner than you think. And it might actually happen later than I thought. But there's a push from the cities. There's a push from the federal government. There's a push from the FTA. That's the governing body for the transit properties. That's federal. There's been push. There's local money in California. We have the Innovative Clean Transit Rule, which is going to require all the major transit agencies to only buy zero emission buses after a certain point. And you're seeing more of that. There's 15 states that are considering, that have already signed on that they're going to adopt those practices. So the reason I like the heavy duty space to electrify, if you look at all the vehicles on the road, trucks, buses, and taxis make up only 10% of those vehicles that are on the road, but they account for 2/3 of all the emissions. So if you only electrify 10%, you get a 2/3 reduction in emissions. So the impact is very tangible. It's a compelling argument.
I feel like one of the problems when we talk to investors about companies like yours, about GreenPower, is that buses are just not that sexy when you compare them to, let's say, a Tesla Roadster, right? So what do you say to investors who think that way about your industry? I mean, you just said it right there, like you're doing important work, but a bus just isn't that sexy.
And there's nothing to be said. I mean, it's just not sexy. It's hard to make a bus cool or sexy. It's more just practical transportation is the way we look at buses. If you look at them, there's nothing stylized about them. If you ever drive one, they're not exciting to drive. Acceleration isn't impressive. Handling isn't impressive. There is an incremental improvement of an EV versus a regular internal combustion vehicle for performance and things. And we can do a lot more whiz-bang things. We have better stability and traction control. We can start incorporating functional safety into the vehicles, which is automatic braking and autonomous features. interestingly enough, a lot of investment houses have had these like ESG groups that are environmental sustainability and governance, I guess is what that stands for. And they're really looking at those spaces. And there's very little sexy about any of those spaces, to be honest. The long and the short of where these investors are going is that they all feel, almost to a one that I talk to, an obligation to be part of, cleaning the air and doing something about transportation and equity and all these other things. So our space really touches those parts. It just lacks the excitement of a Tesla or whatever other cool EV that's out there.
I feel like you just nailed your motto right there, semi-sexy. I mean, come on. That's but what do you say to investors who point to the low number of deliveries of buses? It's really hard to equate buses to cars. But you guys so far, I think, have produced, a few hundred buses. Is that a good thing? Is that harder than I think it is to make? I'm sure it must be to scale up.
The good thing is if you look at all the real demand we see for school buses, for EV buses, for medium and heavy duty trucks, you take all this demand, you lump it together. There's not enough supply out there of manufacturers. So there's definitely enough space for all of us. The thing that separates GreenPower, I think, from a lot of the other guys is we will reach profitability this year. That's my focus. A lot of guys, companies, people that are in the space, my competitors, a lot of them are focused more on kind of talking about what they're doing. GreenPower kind of keeps our head down and we just deliver product. And even so, it's very modest. It's not that easy to deliver the big vehicles. You've got charging issues, you've got training issues, you've got a lot of things. I mean, it really is a kind of a new technology you're bringing on board. If you compare what we do here in the US to, let's say, China, where now most of their fleets are electrified. Their government just comes and says, electrify all these. The next day, they're placing the orders, and very soon thereafter, they're getting their vehicles, and the other ones are getting hauled off to God knows where, and they're electrified. America's different. We have to get people's buy-in. There's no, authoritative rule by fiat kind of, I say this and it gets done. If you electrified everything just overnight, I mean, the technology is different. There's so many different aspects to it that I don't think you could just, seamlessly do it. There would be a lot of hiccups. So we're trying to make sure that, we know we're doing a good thing by replacing polluting vehicles with our clean air products. We also don't want to have a lot of egg on our face with these, horrific deployment concerns, because there's still some people that don't like EVs out there. If there's one EV fire, you hear all about it. I see buses and trucks and cars that are burned up on the side of the road all the time. You never hear anything about those cars. But one Volt or one Bolt or, one bus or one Tesla catches on fire, I mean, it's like international news. There is a lot of that. It's very sensationalized. People are very reluctant because they really feel that there's risk involved with it. That's why we're just so pleased with all of our customers, because they are taking risks.
Well, let's talk about that risk for a second, because I feel like a lot of municipalities, a lot of school districts, you're right. They don't want to stick their neck out and be like, yeah, we're going to electrify the whole fleet. They usually start with a pilot program, and they usually start with, one or two buses from some manufacturer, and they test them out. And then I think what happens is that if a neighboring town or school district does it and they have good results, then they're like, oh, well, they did it and nothing bad happened. Let's us try it. Has that been your experience?
Yes, there's something about prudence that's good, especially if you're using government money. I don't want people to waste money. Our product saved money. They check a lot of boxes.
Yeah, so tell me about that. So let's say I'm a school district. I try your product. Tell me about some anecdotal cases of school districts or cities that have tried your buses, and then what do they experience in the first couple of years?
Well, unfortunately, our buses have been delivered mostly during COVID. So the school bus product hasn't had a lot of exposure, and we just don't have enough of a critical mass to give some experiences to you. But for the most part, the electric buses that we deliver, behind me is a picture of our EV Star. It's the one we deliver the most of. That's a medium-duty vehicle. Those from day one, if you can figure out a way to either offset the the capital cost with a voucher, or if you finance the vehicle, just from day one financing the vehicle, where someone lends me the money to buy the vehicle and I start operating it, those vehicles save money. They save money on fuel, they save money on service and maintenance, even make money on these vehicles if you've got the right scenario. Let's say for here in California, there's certain people that actually, to operate their vehicles, are getting money in their pocket because they're able to take advantage of the fuel credits and HVIP and all these other things that are going on. The school bus market is going to be very pleased with EVs. I mean, if you look at what our maintenance intervals for our motor is, the traction motor, the motor that provides the propulsion of the vehicle, it doesn't get touched for 600,000 miles. Not even, no scheduled maintenance, nothing. No bearings, no nothing. It basically has 3 moving parts if you include the bearing. So they're very robust, no transmission. Buses go through something called a midlife. You wouldn't know what a midlife is unless you're in the commercial space. Basically, the vehicle lasts longer than the engine and the transmission. So what they'll do is they'll repower them. They'll either put a remanufactured motor in there and transmission, or a new one. With EVs, you typically don't need a midlife. And we used to, early on when batteries were expensive and less reliable, we thought, you might midlife the batteries. You change a battery pack. Now we've changed our mind and said we don't even have to midlife the batteries for the most part. If we have a big enough pack and we use the right chemistries that have a lot more cycles available, then you don't even have to do that. So the vehicles don't even have a midlife. So there's a lot of costs that say, but in the school bus space, it's not just so much about the cost, because most properties don't pay for their school buses. They're awarded grants to even buy their regular diesel school buses. The real barrier to entry in that space has been having the charging available. That's why we offer 3 types of charging: the level 2 overnight charging, the DC fast charging, and then we do a wireless charging option.
So what are some of the exciting things that you can do with a school bus? Because, I mean, you're in this position where now you have a giant battery that is able to drive around. Have you looked into any possibilities of, say, powering a school to be used as a shelter during emergencies using the power of a school bus battery?
We've got bidirectionality available in our vehicles. Typically, it's done at the charger. There's like 3 different things you can look at when you've got exporting power from a vehicle. You do a vehicle to vehicle, which is, let's say a vehicle's out there stuck, and you kind of plug them together. And you could charge a stranded vehicle on the road. That's V to V. Then there's the vehicle to grid feature, whereas I'm powering an entire city or an entire electrical grid. I'm putting power back into it, kind of the way solar works at our home. The solar kind of puts power back into the grid, and then you get the opportunity to buy back that power from the electrical company. The last one is vehicle to load, which is what you're talking about, which would be a vehicle to plug into a building. And that is something we've been doing for years. Most buildings have generators, so they typically have backup power or standby power. The bus will be, once we see a lot more of these deployed, they will be the generator. So you're exactly right. People are going to want that ability, or maybe pull it up to a hospital or some school, whatever facility that needs power that's critical, that you could just be able to plug in your bus and get power exported. We did a full design. So you talk about the battery pack being big. Most of the products that we compete against out there are an existing school bus where they stripped out the motor and the transmission drive line and put in batteries and electric motor in whatever space they could find. What we did is we started with the battery and the electric motor and built a bus around it. So our school bus is not basically a modified truck chassis. It's a real integrated vehicle with the batteries are around the perimeter of the vehicle, because we have structure, a superstructure on the outside of the vehicle, not just a couple frame rails that you got to stuff everything into like most school buses.
Is that why your school bus looks so different than other school buses? Your school bus, by the way, is called the Beast, which I totally love. And it looks very distinctive compared to most school buses. And I was asking Jesse the other day, I'm like, why do all school buses kind of look the same? I assume it's because it was just a diesel engine up front and, they had to have that big thing. Yours does seem like redesigned from scratch.
Yeah, so most school buses, traditionally school buses were a truck chassis and then basically a cab, and you would take a metal body and like U-bolt it on. We call it a body on chassis. And it's more like being cargo in a truck than being a passenger in a bus.
And that's why it feels like you're cargo on a truck.
Exactly. Yeah, the ride's very poor. We've got some things that we don't want to be banging around too much. Electric motors, you don't want to bang around too much because they degauss and start losing efficiencies when you have permanent magnet motors. There's other things also. You've got liquid cooling lines and just stuff you just don't want to bang too much. So
and the kids too. I remember sitting in the back of the bus and you'd be like, hit the bump, and then you'd go over the bump and you go, wow. And I'm sure I'm feeling that right now in my back, because we just sat on that was the fun part.
Right.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it launches you a little bit. We do a much nicer ride. We think we've got a longer build. Our vehicle is designed to last longer. Our structure is all metal. It's a steel chassis with a all aluminum, fully recyclable superstructure. We use a Swiss Constellium extrusions to build our vehicle. Same stuff they use for all the high-end cars. Tesla gets their suspension pieces from these guys. The Constellium makes plain parts. At first I tried to market it. Hey, we're safer than the other buses. And one of my competitors looked over at me. He goes, we've already got the safest form of transportation in the world. Incremental safety doesn't really sell a vehicle right now. You could try selling to parents, but rarely do you have any, injuries in school buses. You keep kids outside of crash zones. That's why they're so high. The drivers are very well trained. They've got very strict rules about top speed, about, you remember stopping in front of the train tracks, opening the door and looking, that kind of, the drivers really go through a lot. So it's hard to sell it as safer, even though our cabin is structurally more safe. Realistically, at the end of the day, the people we have to sell for the most part on the vehicle are the parents and the drivers. The drivers are the ones, if a driver likes to drive our bus and starts talking about it, it is amazing how that goes up the chain and they start looking more seriously at your product. And then the parents are going to be pushing this. Like you said, the PTA, parents are very involved. That's why you're going to see this school bus push. That's why the optics are so good also for this administration. They're claiming they want to electrify 20% of the fleet over the next 5 years. That's 5,000 buses a year. I mean, that's way more than any of us can produce in the electric vehicle space.
So you're demand limited then?
We would be capacity limited, right? Yeah, we got more demand than there will be more demand, at least if this administration gets its way. And those are some of the goals they set. And then moving on, they want to accelerate it because, there's almost 500,000 school buses in the U.S. And that's a lot of buses. And most of them are close to end of life. So there's a great opportunity to replace those with something that costs less to operate, saves time, saves money, saves all the stuff, and is zero emission.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that. So yeah, there's 480,000 school buses in the U.S. alone. And how do you grab that market? I mean, do you just go district by district? Do you go to trade shows? Do you lobby? Can our viewers help? How can we get more electric buses into these school and city districts' hands?
Viewers can always help. People can help if you think that there's a benefit to society and to everybody to have more electric school buses. You can always let your representatives know on the local level, even at your school boards, and even your politicians that you may have that are overseeing your district. The demand is now being driven top down and bottom up. So we're seeing that it's the ball is just rolling. There's just momentum going. We'll see how all of us in our space deal with electrifying the infrastructure properly so we can deploy these vehicles in a meaningful way. And I'm also talking about rural places where we've got buses that might drive, not 100 miles in a day, maybe 200 miles in a day. How do you deal with that? How do these rural communities take advantage of EVs? So we've been working on cold weather. We ran our vehicles up at Altoona during winter to make sure that, we were able to meet the challenges of the cold, the snow, the making sure that the vehicle could charge and discharge properly. But there are challenges, and we'll see what gets electrified. I think it should be a nice, even distribution. But you're asking why, what would be what's our strategy to get out there? Interestingly enough, states and districts have their own specifications. So we can't be everything to everybody right out of the gate. Companies that have been around for a long time, they already have developed a product for each and every one of them. I mean, there's companies out there that are almost 100 years old in the school bus space. So the way we're doing it is we're looking at the best possible market for a product where there's the most pull for, the most opportunities, and we start making our vehicle conform to those requirements there. So those I would say would be the biggest issues we would have as far as just going nationally overnight with some of our bigger buses. The smaller buses, like the Type A's, the little tiny buses that look kind of like a van in the front and sort of like a school bus in the back, those seem to be a little more universal, less specific than the bigger buses. So you could charge one of our little school buses in your garage overnight, no problem. It's got about a little bit bigger battery than a Tesla Model S, maybe 120, 150 mile range, which is fine for these school properties. Remember, they're picking up kids in the morning and then dropping them off in the afternoon. So they get to sit for a long time during the day. And that's another reason why you're, having the vehicle being able to charge and discharge, be it like just like a power pack that is kind of fungible. You can use it anywhere. These are just basically battery packs that are just sitting there waiting to be used.
Yeah, we're super excited about, VPPs and vehicle to grid on this show. And we're also stockholders in GreenPower Motors. So just disclaimer to everyone who's watching. So unlike a lot of startups last quarter, as you said, you were actually profitable, $2.3 million with operating costs of $1.5 million. And so can you talk a little bit about your margins? Is this the kind of thing that's going to get better over time as production goes up?
We try to be very judicious about our margins. We try to make enough margins where the company can remain profitable, but we really want deployments. We want to get vehicles in people's hands. So a lot of the early startup companies, they think that they are taking money off the table by really charging exorbitant amounts for these vehicles. We've got we try to maintain the margins that we've got. As soon as we can get the lower costs when we have large supplies, the economies of scale going, then we want to make sure immediately that those savings are passed on to the customer. So for us, it's about units delivered and profitability. You need both. And if your prices are too high, you'll never really, you don't know what the market's going to be. You can't really predict it. You have to just always try to drive costs down and while maintaining quality and getting products out there. That's our theory. It's not like, we can continue to keep charging whatever, we're going to do it. No, as soon as we've got an opportunity to lower our price, we will, because that's what's going to drive the numbers, and that's what's going to keep us really on top of that curve. Everybody else has been running out of ICs and all kinds of semiconductor componentry. You look at all the big four, the GMs, the Stellantises. They buy their products and receive them almost as they use them. Their entire system, the lean manufacturing and all these things, which is great. It's got great quality aspects to it. Statistically, there's nothing better. If you were to start a company, and I could show you on paper what running lean manufacturing, zero defect management, all these things that everyone wants to go after, all the ISO standards that really produce great quality products and give you the vehicles you're driving today. There is a drawback to that. And that is if you've got global supply chain interruptions, shipping interruptions, manufacturing interruptions, where do you go? I've got vehicles that, the parts are coming in tomorrow. To meet it at that part of the supply, the manufacturing process, I need to put that part in. If that breaks down, now my whole system's gone kaput. We're small enough that we don't do lean manufacturing, and it's never really made a lot of sense to me on our scale. But we follow a lot of the Toyota quality management and the lean manufacturing processes. What we don't do is any just-in-time stuff. So when we found out the chips were getting, in short supply, we bought a large amount of semiconductor products and components that use those products in advance, paid for them, and shipped a lot of them. So we were able to stay ahead of that curve. As you grow and you have to start doing a lot of these just-in-time things, it's more difficult. So we've got products to deliver when some of the big guys just don't have anything to deliver right now. You go to car lots, you can't believe they're a third full. It's crazy.
Well, let's talk about scale for a second. I mean, we were investors early on with GreenPower. We made a lot of money and we haven't sold. And the reason we haven't sold is we think that there's a lot more growth to be had. Are we right? Is the electric bus market just going to keep growing? And how can you guys scale? Like, what is your roadmap going forward?
We expect to be doubling our output year over year over year until we get critical mass. And my job as the president of the company is really to make sure we are ahead of the demand and the market. So we're always building vehicles. Unlike our competitors that build on order and now they can't get parts and stuff, we've got vehicles that are getting built month after month after month. So if you just annualize what we're producing, in EV Stars, we're producing 20 a month. School buses, we're producing 10 a month. We produce even more than that, actually, but those are the numbers we've absolutely committed to. When you look at those numbers, this year we should be breaking 300 vehicles. Again, we'll see what COVID is. We'll build that many. We'll see how many we get to deliver to our customers. We expect to double for at least the next 5 years. So it'll give you an idea of where we'll be. It does grow very quickly when you're talking about 10x in 5 years. But in any event, the market is huge. The medium duty space is really taking off. Ford announced that they're coming out with a Transit that's completely electrified. It's a different class than our vehicle. It doesn't have the range nor the capacity, about half the capacity for load and about half the range of our vehicle. But they're going after the biggest market there is. That's the last mile delivery market that Amazon and some of these postal, basically you're moving around boxes of potato chips that don't weigh anything. We've gone after more of the mid-mile, maybe heavier products to move those. That market's a lot smaller. It's not hundreds of thousands of vehicles, it's tens of thousands of vehicles. But heck, if we could get tens of thousands of vehicles a year, at some point in the near, visible future, we'd be really ahead of the game.
So now, as we're talking to potential customers who might be watching this video right now, I've been hearing a lot about different government incentive programs that customers can take advantage of. One is called the HVIP. And I wonder if a lot of these districts don't even know that there are incentives because these aren't regular buses. These are zero emission buses. Can you tell our customers what kind of programs they might be able to take advantage of?
Certainly. There are programs all over the country. In California, there's HVIP, which is the hybrid incentive voucher program. It's now just zero emission, basically, vehicles that they're trying to push. So that program in California pays down a good portion, I would say at least 30% of the vehicle's capital cost. There's a very similar program in New Jersey. They've got a program, there's a similar program in New York. The nice thing about those is they're not credits, they're actual cash. We get the money directly from the governing body, and then we have to show that we're passing those savings on to the customer. So it's day one, you get that money even, as you don't even have to put it out and wait till the end of the tax year to get it back. So it's not a tax credit, it's an actual voucher that is redeemed immediately. But otherwise, we expect some more incentives from the Biden administration to be out there. Often those are tax credits, but we all pay taxes. So hopefully we can use those. And then there are other Clean Cities has programs. There's Clean Cities in most major cities in the country. They're an organization. Air quality management districts. Here in Southern California, we've got Southern California Air Quality Management District. They're all over California. There's really just too numerous. You really have to just get out there and look to see what's available. And typically a simple web search will show you what voucher or incentive programs are available for medium and heavy duty vehicles.
So, I mean, this sounds a little overwhelming if I am the, superintendent of a school district, or I am, a school board member, and I'm like, yeah, I don't even know where to begin for getting discounts, but also for getting information on cost of ownership. What would you recommend? I mean, what does your typical sale look like? Like, are you spending a lot of time educating your consumers, or are these people who are already educated and they already know to come to you?
No, the most difficult part of selling EVs right now is the education of the customer and really letting them know what's available to them and understanding the benefits of the vehicle, but also understanding, the cost of the vehicle compared to an internal combustion vehicle. Right now, an EV does not replace a gasoline or diesel vehicle under all conditions. There are some conditions where you really need an internal combustion vehicle. In the school districts, we can replace the whole fleet with very, very few exceptions. If I were hauling product across the country, long haul, right now might be a little tricky to do that with a big Class 8 big rig. Just not the most effective and efficient way to do it. So there are things we have to first find out what the customer is doing, make sure that the product is right for them, and that we have the right product for them. And then, like you said, we have to talk to them. We instruct the customers on where there's money available that they could take advantage of. We do analysis for them. We'll do route analysis, driver analysis, duty cycle analysis. There's a lot of different things you can do to show them how much money they can save, to show them what they've got to watch out for.
Now, we talked about your EV Star. We talked about the Beast. You have a bunch, like you mentioned, a bunch of different models, a bunch of different products. Are there any that have kind of surprised you that have become either more popular than you thought, or that you thought were going to be popular and just didn't sell?
I was really enamored with our double-decker transit bus. That's a product I tried to get my last employer to really focus on. With articulated buses that seem to be very popular here in the U.S. Those are buses that look like an accordion in the middle. Those are actually two vehicles when it comes to traffic. It's they're not the best for traffic mitigation. They take up space on the road. Double deckers are just so cool. You get to sit upstairs. You're kind of riding above it all. It's a great riding experience. I've always loved them my whole life, even as a little kid. I expected the big battery electric double decker to take off here in the U.S., and it hasn't. I mean, a couple guys keep trying it, and they've tried them in the past too. We've had double decks. You'll see them running in Seattle. The LA used to run them years ago. We had some Neoplans here, and you can seat 100 people in the double decker. That's a lot of passengers. One driver, one bus, 100 people. So it seems to have like the economy of scale and everything that you like. The double deck, that's one product that never took off. As a matter of fact, my spin on that has been to make a battery electric sightseeing over-the-road coach, which isn't really a double-decker. It's just kind of a raised deck, so it's not super tall. One of the issues with the double-deckers is that they're too tall, and the U.S. just isn't designed for them, and people keep hitting the second deck on things. So for sightseeing, we have a very unique product that's coming out very soon. So keep an eye peeled for it. It's our Synapse sightseeing bus. It's going to be pretty exciting.
Oh, that's cool. Because one of the problems in sightseeing with a diesel bus is that they're so loud, and smelly.
That's right, loud and smelly. The sightseeing buses also, nowadays, you need to make sure you've got places for people that are mobility challenged. So you need to have. It's tricky to do, but we've developed a product that has a downstairs with a ramp for people that are mobility challenged, and a full open upper deck for people that want to be out in the open air and kind of look around 360 and again be above it all. So we'll see. That might be a major flop too, but you never know. And then the over-the-road coaches, now that battery prices coming down, where we can make a over-the-road coach that has meaningful range and still has storage down below for airports and things of that nature to put baggage and stuff. We think that those will be very exciting and in-demand products.
Cool. And what about electric duck boats?
So are you guys from Wisconsin, or so? How do you guys know about duck boats?
We're from Boston.
You guys have duck boats in Boston?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. That's where they started, I think, right?
No, they started in World War II. They were troop transport boats.
So when they came back from World War II, they landed in Boston, and I'm sure some young enterprising Navy officer probably said, "Oh, well, let's." It was probably the Army, wasn't it?
Throw them into the river.
We've had them for as long as I can remember. Yeah.
Have you ever driven a duck boat?
We've been
Yes.
yeah.
They let me sit on his lap, and I got to drive it in the water.
Yeah, it's very, very poor handling boats. That's actually a cool product. They are something that could be electrified, I think, relatively easily. I that hadn't even been on my radar, but I'm make a note of it right now.
All right.
All right.
Yes.
Yes, you did it, Jesse.
Woo!
All right.
And then if you just sell them to people. Because I want, and then if it's a house, I mean, people take school buses, they turn them into tiny houses. If
No,
you
that's
could,
true.
If you could float it across the river, you know.
I wonder about airports. I mean, buses now at airports, I think airports are trying to get clean. They must be a big customer, right?
Certainly, yeah. We've got buses running at airports, mostly on the tarmac side for crew transportation, other things, but we've got big buses running on that side. And in California now, the major airports are also going to be required to buy only zero-emission vehicles for any vehicle going to the airport. So we're now doing crew transportation from the airport to hotels and wherever they're staying. So that's where we're starting with airlines and the very dedicated transportation there. I think the next steps will be the car rental agencies, and they're starting to here and there, but we'll see. There's big plans for airport electrification, not just in the buses, but also in the ground support equipment, the fuel trucks, all those, the tugs even. I don't know if you guys have seen this. They've got tugs where a guy will back up this, looks like a little mini tractor, and push the plane back and forth. Now they've got them where they're fully remote operated and the pilot controls them, where it's just this like little remote tug comes in and the pilot parks the vehicle himself with his controls. So there's neat technologies. Autonomous is really starting to, if you guys have driven a Tesla in the autopilot mode and have seen some of the very limited capability autonomous, how exciting that is. You're starting to see that technology along with the functional safety, the ISO 26262 and some of the other standards, SAE standards that are starting to really take root, are now beginning to give us this hardened, redundant control systems in the vehicles themselves at the vehicle level that allow all these sensors and other things to plug into that and have very reliable autonomous features. You're starting to see that with adaptive cruise control, auto braking and things. Those are just starting, getting your taste. For most of us that don't get to drive a vehicle with autopilot, it's a taste, and that's going to evolve. That's used in many different applications with the airports specifically. I could see in my lifetime autonomous vehicles being a real commercial and even a consumer reality.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about that a lot on this channel. It's very exciting. This next decade is going to be super exciting. And it's going to be really exciting to watch your company move, further and further into the electric bus space, because I feel like we're just at the tip of the iceberg. And as you're talking about, a lot of these school districts and a lot of these cities are just kind of dipping their toe in the water, but it's just going to become, they're going to jump in as the decade goes on. It's going to be really exciting to watch. Brendan, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing this information about GreenPower Motor. If you guys are interested in the company, we're going to put up the stock ticker now so you can check that out. And if they want to, check out their website, because they got a lot of cool buses to go check out. And it sounds like pretty soon there's going to be even more. So that'll be really fun to see. Thank you so much, Brendan.
Thank you, gentlemen. Really appreciate your time today.